Good evening, everyone. I hope everyone can hear me, right? Okay. So yesterday we had just tried to review on access management, and today we're gonna discuss on database module. Okay. Any doubts from the last sessions? Any doubts from the last session? Any doubts from the last session? Are we clear about? Shall we start? Okay. So we're gonna discuss on database module. So before database understanding, I just want to know the view. If anyone had an idea on database, what is the database? Anyone? Like a basic understanding? What is a database? Mhm. Someone said it's used for a storage. Collection of interrelated data, someone trying to have that, tuples and attributes. We have a different yes answers. Mhm. So it's a software where we can try to have an access, someone said. So before, what is the need of a data to be stored? Okay. So the introduction of the term database, it's actually coming into availability to have a data to be stored in terms of a storage. Like earlier in around mid 90s 60s, during 90s, where the data is to be stored in terms of disks and drums, right? Like a tape based systems in the past. So it's kind of a big devices we used to have. So as computers grow in terms of a speed and capability and number of general purpose database systems, it's keep evolving. Okay, so it's begun to grow, and the technology being evolving, and they are trying to have it collated, trying to bring up new kind of a tools or the products to the market, right? I'm audible, right? Okay. So for to store this kind of a data, where we can try to easily access, and where we can try to easily retrieve and modify as well. That's the main task, where there should be a high level of a storage data where used to be stored in some particular place, correct? It's kind of a storage. To retrieve the data, that's a task. Okay. So that has to be very quick, and in terms, again, it has to be secure enough. All right. So understanding the term for a database, you can see a database is an organized collection of a data so that it can be easily accessed and managed. That's a theoretical definition. So how we can try to retrieve the data? We can organize the data into tables, rows, columns, and index to make it easier to find the relevant information. For example, we have an Excel sheet, right? If we have an Excel sheet, if we have a data like 100 of lines, so how we need to fetch the information of a particular employee ID or particular data? or particular employee ID, particular department, or particular first name or the last name, we have to search it manually with some particular keywords, correct? So it's not possible for the data which has been stored in some kind of a particular applications where we are trying to use some dynamic websites or the applications installed in your devices or in the mobiles like games or softwares or anything. So there should be a backend database. So whatever the data that you are trying to store, it has to be stored inside some kind of a cloud storage or in terms of a physical infrastructure or on-premise environment. There has to be some kind of a platform, right? So where once the data is stored, so it can be easily, it should be easily accessed and it should be easily retrieved. It should be easily modified and trying to have the required convenience to so that we can try to have the data access in an organized manner. Okay, so that's the main need. So that's where there are different software which comes up. All right, so it is trying to tell you can organize data into tables, rows, columns, and index to make it easier to find the relevant information. All right, so what kind of a different databases which were there, we will try to understand. We have a different database types. Database types are relational database types and non-relational database type. Okay, so these are the key considerations where we need to use based on our the project requirements. So if you want to use a relational database, we have a different tools, softwares. If you want to have a non-relational, we have a different types. So we need to see what is the difference between relational and non-relational, and we will try to do a understanding and trying to do a lab session on these two databases as well. Okay, so before considering this database, what are the prerequisites that you need to make sure? Like a scalability. For example, I had an application in my project where I want to give that application website over the online where I'm trying to manage the backend infrastructure and the servers, right? Now, as the application is keep growing, the load on the website is keep growing and the number of customers are increasing. That means the database, the size has to be increased, correct? So it has to be scalable. It should be automatically scalable based on the load what it has to be received. So we have to consider the scalability factor and how much storage it requires, that we need to make sure. So total storage requirements is a consideration. What kind of a data, object size and the type, what kind of an objects like images, text, documents, videos. So what kind of a data, what kind of an objects we have, like the size and what kind of a data its type. The types has to be make sure. And how durable and how much time you have to keep the data inside the database. So these are the considerations usually which has to be taken care during the deployment of a database. All right. So we have a two types of a database, that is relational database and the non-relational database. In the relational, we have a Microsoft SQL servers, Oracle database, MySQL. When it comes to non-relational, we have a MongoDB, Cassandra, and Redis. These are the different databases. So we'll try to see and review one of the database in each database types. Okay. What is a relational database? A relational database is something which we have a correlation between one table to another table. Okay. Usually what happens, the database used to be in the tabular form, right? Tables, columns, and indexes, correct? So in general, what actually this database has to be, you might have heard of a software, right? SQL software. So inside the SQL, the database tables used to be looking this way. You can see it should be in the tabular form, tables, columns, and with the help of indexes, we used to pull the data. This is how it looks like. It should be looking into this way. See, it should be in the tabular form. We used to perform some SQL queries to fetch the data. Okay, this is how the database example that we used to look out, where the software called SQL, which is used to pull the data from the database with the help of a query language. That is nothing but a SQL query language. You can see this how the tabular form it looks like. You see this? Business entity ID, the person name, the title, the first name, the middle name, and the last name. So all this information used to be stored inside the database in the tabular form, in the form of a rows and the columns. Okay. To pull this information, what kind of a language you used to use? Basically query language. That means we used to perform some queries to fetch the data from the database. So this kind of a technology which used to be in the relational database. So basically relational database is something when we are trying to retrieve the information from one table, there is a correlation to the another table. It will try to fetch the data and try to provide us with the results. Okay. That is how it used to be. So what are the benefits of this kind of a relational database? It is easy to use, reduced data storage, and we can try to pull the information from this particular database with the help of an SQL query language. That is nothing but a structured query language. The full form of SQL is nothing but a structured query language. We will try to write some queries, and with the help of a query, we'll try to fetch the information within the database. So relational database is ideal when you need a strict schema rules. As I told you, with the help of SQL query language, we need to have some queries that has to be executed with the help of some kind of a values, integer values, string values, and the select queries, right? You should have follow the strict schema rules, or else it will try to give you error if you doesn't try to put a proper queries. So it will be ideal when you do not need extreme read and write capacities. That means too much of a load, if it is not required on the database, like the applications, when you need it, doesn't need a too much of a input and outputs like a read and write capacity. During that situations, RDS databases will be useful. Which this kind of a database will be useful when you don't need an extreme performance. When there is not requirement of a high level performance, then this kind of a database can be used. And RDBMS, Relational Database Management System, can be the best, lowest effort solution. All right. So for example, if you see, I'll just try to. If you see this example, let me try to see. So for example, consider there is a user who is trying to access the website. Okay, for example, any e-commerce website. Now, the request which used to be come to the servers, right? The backend servers, we try to install some Apache or IIS softwares. When the user is initiating trying to have a request to the server, what happened? The server will pass on the request to the backend database server. Okay. When user is trying to fetch the information, for example, he had some order placed in some kind of e-commerce website. He want to download the invoices or the customer ID. Okay. For example, you can see inside the database, there are different tables like invoice information, invoice ID, customer ID, product ID, date, time, status, the product level information, product ID, price, description, image, and the order information, the customer first name, last name, age, gender, emails, and everything. So whatever the information related to his account or the profile, it has been stored inside the database of this particular user. So when he's trying to access the website and he open the website and he'll try to click on the account settings. So what happens? Whatever the click he's trying to do from the website, the request from the application server, it will try to send out an SQL query on the backend database server, because the communication will be happened with the help of a queries. Once the information is fetched from the database, so the database will try to give a response, and the response will go to the application server, and it will try to show you the graphical user interface to the user so that he can try to see the information in the front end. So this is how the information used to be. But you can see there is a correlation between one table to another table. The invoice ID table is this, related to the product. Product ID information is related to the order, and order ID is related to the customer. So there is a correlation between one table to the another table. So that's why we are calling this as a relational database. And whenever there is a information that has to be queried with the help of SQL query, we need to write up queries, okay, where we can try to input or fetch the information from the background. We have a different Like, if you people are interested, you can try to learn SQL query language as well. We have a good websites where you can try to learn SQL query. If I try to type such kind of an examples, there are some queries you can see. For example, W3 schools. There are different websites. You can try to have a queries that you can try to pull. Okay. So these are the websites which will try to give us an understanding on how to write an SQL queries. You can see SQL create DB, create a database and the database name. It will try to create a table. Create a database. If you want to create a table, for example, create table, employee table, column 1. That means employee ID, integer value, employee first name, string value, character values. Employee first name, character values, employee last name, character values, employee email ID, you can try to have a var characters, or employee pin code, you can try to have an integer value. These kind of a schema rules you have to follow and trying to have the data inputs. And when you want to fetch the information, you need to write some kind of a select query. Okay, we can try to have a select query. This is a select query. What is this? It is used to select the data from the database. For example, I have a information which I want to fetch from this particular table. What I need to type? Select customer name, comma, city from customers table, like whatever the table I created. Select first name, comma, last name, comma, from employee table. These are kind of a simple syntaxes as well, where once you try to type the query, it will give you all the information in the tabular form. From where this information will be pulled? It will be pulled from the backend database. So everything will be communicated with the SQL query languages. We can try to have a queries that can be executed and we can try to write up as well. You're getting my point? This is how it works. We will try to do a lab session as well, sample lab session, how it looks like. I'll show you how database can be created for understanding as well in real time. Okay. So as I told you, in the relational database, we have an Amazon relational database, Amazon Redshift, Amazon Aurora, and SQL. We will try to launch some kind of a Amazon RDS SQLs, and we will try to have a database launched. Okay. Coming to the Amazon RDS, it's a service that has been provided by the Amazon AWS. So Amazon Relational Database System, it is a fully managed relational database service. So Amazon Relational Database Service, it is a collection of managed services that make it simple to set up, operate, scale database in the cloud. Okay. So what are the different types of a database within the cloud? In general, compared to the cloud, you can see we have a on-premise database, we have a hosted database in Amazon EC2 server, and hosted database in a managed AWS. That means with this type of a thing, what actually AWS is trying to do, it is trying to provide us an AWS database service as a software for us to use. That means it is trying to provide us a service for a usage. Okay. So that means we shouldn't be worried about backend configuration and the deployment and the management of the data. Everything AWS will be managed. That means hosted database in a managed AWS cloud. That means what is the difference between all these three? We will try to understand. Here, only we need to manage the application software. As I told you, software as a service they are trying to provide. We will try to just manage the software inside the cloud, and the backend, the scalability, like whatever the storage, whatever the size it requires, the AWS will manage here. The availability, the backups, the database softwares, the database software installation, operating system selection and the patches, operating system installation, server maintenance, the physical infrastructure in the background, and the racks and the stacks in the physical data centers, and the power and the networking concepts, everything, these will be managed by the cloud vendor. These aspects will be managed by the cloud vendor, and we have the options like a flexible options where we can simply launch a database inside the cloud very quick that we manage. When we try to see this hosted database in Amazon EC2, this means EC2 is nothing but a server, right? EC2 is nothing but a server. So what is the difference between this thing? Here, what we need to manage the software, we need to manage the scalable factor, we need to manage the availability in a different availability zones, and the backups, software patches, installation, and operating system patches. All these things we need to manage. When you try to install a hosted database in EC2. That means you need to use the service and you need to install the software, database software in the server. You need to configure and everything you have to do. Only the backend physical infrastructure part that will be managed by the AWS cloud. This is one kind of a factor. Hosted database on-premise. On-premise means obviously everything will be managed by the on-premise physical infrastructure, right? We will need to manage all these things at the private data center. We need to manage all this like a server to backend architecture to the software installation and the database configuration. Everything it has to be completely responsible for the customers. That means we manage. So out of this, what is the time saving in terms of reliability and the consideration, the quick access? Hosted database and managed AWS. This is the best kind of service which cloud is trying to provide us, so that we shouldn't be worried about all these factors. There is no issues with this, all this configuration. Simply, we try to manage only the application software. That's it. That's the benefit of hosted database in Amazon AWS, which we can try to simply launch a database service and we can try to manage that. That means we can try to configure the database with the help of an RDS. We will try to configure RDS as well. Okay, I'll try to show you how it can be done. So when it comes to the RDS characters, relational database characters, access patterns, transactional and the light analytical data, where it requires a frequent data, that has to be input, reads and writes. And the data size, which can be low level data range to high level TB range. Such kind of a requirement, this RDS will be a beneficial. When it comes to the performance level, mid to high throughput with a low latency. Throughput and latency in terms of a networking concepts. That means in terms of a performance and the access patterns and the performance in terms of a bandwidth and how frequent, the faster response it is trying to give you when you launch in a private or the public networks. So always the latency should be low and should be high throughput. Then the networking performance will be more. So that's what it is trying to show up. And in terms of an organizational considerations and the business level considerations, transactional applications and dynamic websites and such kind of a use cases, this RDS database will be useful factors. Okay. Basically, the difference between relational database and non-relational database is, in relational database, we have a data which we completely have some kind of an organized and structured data, like employee data, first name, last name, and email ID, account details, everything like an organized manner. It's kind of a simpler organized manner. I want to fetch the data and store the data. Such kind of requirements, RDS will be a beneficial database system. In the non-relational, completely unstructured data, there is no need to grab the data like in terms of a structured manner. It can be random, it can be anything, and it can be any form. That is nothing but a non-RDS, not structured manner. RDS versus non-RDS is simply structured data versus non-structured data. As simple as that, to quickly remember that. Okay, RDS will have a strict schema rules. That means we need to perform exact queries and the integer values and character values, string values, everything has to be properly defined with the help of a queries. Non-RDS databases, we don't need to have any complex queries. We simply can try to input the data, read the data, and trying to modify the data very quick. That is for the unstructured data. Okay, based on the different work cases, project loads, we will try to utilize such kind of a databases in general theory. Okay. What are the secure factors? How we can try to secure Amazon RDS databases. Recommendations. Run the relational databases in a virtual private cloud for enhanced security. That means it will try to provide service isolation. That means provides access restricted to specific individuals and specific to networks. And we can try to have a IP firewall protection with the help of a security groups. It is kind of a recommendations when you are launching a secure Amazon relational database system. Use identity IAM policies for authentication and access. That means yesterday only we have discussed, right? For IAM, the purpose and the benefits. So it will try to give us an overview and the permissions to determine who is allowed to manage Amazon RDS resources. Simply, we will try to create a user. We will try to assign the authentication MFA. We will try to assign some policy rule to access database. So such kind of a things we can try to do it with the IAM policies. Use the security groups to control which IP addresses or which servers can connect to your database. Okay, such kind of a things we can try to do it in the security groups. Use SSL for encryption in the transit, like a HTTPS, right? SSL certificates will be used for enhanced security. And use Amazon RDS encryption on DB servers and snapshots to secure data at rest. So we can also have an options for encryption, and we can also take a snapshots to secure the data. These are kind of a features which are available when you're trying to launch a server RDS instances. We can try to enable that to secure the data when it is trying to have it at the rest. That means when it is in the stored in place. We can also configure event notifications to alert when an important relational database events occur. That means we can try to configure notifications when there is an issues, when there is an activities that is going to be in the database level. It will try to send an alert to your email address or a text messages. Okay, such kind of a recommendations, these are suggested while securing the Amazon RDS instances. All right, these are the specific considerations where we can try to have it. So the uses and the database types. The relational database we have, it works well with when we have a very more complex data, when we have to need to combine and join data sets. That means the relation between one SQL table to another table, when we need a syntax rules that has to be defined. Like for integers, we need to write an integer queries. For a string values, we need to write a different queries. I mean, we need to input the particular attributes. For a character values, for the binary values, we need to type some kind of a queries and modify the queries. Then you can try to retrieve the data. Such kind of a rules that we have to define. There are 6 database types that are supported by RDS. One is Microsoft SQL Server, Oracle, MySQL, PostgreSQL, Aurora, and MariaDB. These are the different relational database systems. Okay. So when we look at the sizing, how see database is something when we try to create, right? It should have some backup. Like we need to choose the storage, how much storage of the database, what are the specifications, utilization I need to select during the launch of a database in the cloud. So there are different types of a series, as we have discussed during the demo session and the compute classes, right? We have a T series, we have an M series, we have an R series while you are trying to launch a database. Under this, the database will be trying to launch and you can try to utilize. Under the free tier, anyway, we have a T2.micro, T3.micro, right? So such kind of a requirement. So these are the types. Under the T series, we are calling the burstable instances. M series, we are calling general purpose. R series, we are calling memory optimized. So T series is nothing but a nominal moderate performance, like 1 core CPU to 1 GB RAM to 8 core CPU 32 GB RAM. This is the maximum to minimum specifications. M series, we have a 2 core CPU to 96 core CPU, 8 GB RAM to 384 GB RAM. It is mostly concentrating on the CPUs, M series. R series family is concentrating on memory, RAM, like a 16 GB RAM to 768 GB RAM. Okay. It is ideal for smaller or variable applications. M series kind of a applications will be moderate for the CPU applications. R series will be applicable for a high level inputs and outputs. Okay. So these are the different features or the utilization types when trying to launch a database. Okay. So it is trying to store the users when they are trying to access the data. The data, it will try to convert into the analytical data. The data transformation tools. It will be available as a queries, some kind of analytical tools like a IBM Cognos tools and some kind of a data science tools where we can try to retrieve the data in the analytical data forms. So there are some kind of analytical data purpose also. This kind of a AWS database services will be mostly utilized. It's kind of an example. So what we're gonna do, we'll try to work and trying to understand how this database can be created within the cloud, and we'll try to execute some sample queries. Okay, like storing the data and trying to modify the data as well. We'll try to see the sample data, how the database tables will be looking in real in the server. Okay, we'll try to see how it can be done. Any doubts on understanding the theoretical? Any doubts? We can go with the lab session if you're understanding the theoretical understanding on database. Yes, someone had a core CPU is related to speed. Yeah, CPU is, it is related to the performance for the server to be operated. It's same like a system at your home, like a laptop. CPU cores are needed for the performance level. All right. So what we're gonna do, we will try to practice a lab session once. I log into the console. Yeah, I'll explain about the non-relational database after this lab. Okay. Once we try to practice on RDS, we will go to the non-relational database understanding. All right. We will try to finish the relational database example now. So I'll try to open relational database, manage relational database system. You can see I'm trying to, this is a dashboard. I'll try to create a database. So we have a standard create and easy create. I'm just going to standard. See, there are different databases which supports the relational database types. Aurora, it's a Amazon proprietary database. MySQL, it's a popular and mostly utilized. MariaDB, Oracle proprietary one, PostgreSQL, SQL Server, IBM database. It seems to be new. That has to be integrated. Earlier it was not there. So we will try to use the sample MySQL, which is actually the popular one. I'll try to select this. Okay. Now it has a different versions that has been given based on the project requirements. You can select that. I'm going with the default version, whatever it has been selected. You can see the production, development and testing environment and the free tier. So as part of a free tier information, I'm just trying to see, you can see this. Under the free tier, we have a 750 hours of Amazon RDS in a single availability zone. That means we can try to do a practice lab sessions for T2.micro instance. Under this, the maximum storage we are getting is 20 GB of a general purpose SSD. So I'm trying to select the free tier for the practice purpose. Okay. I'm selecting this. To identify the database name, so we can have a configuration for a unique name here. So I'll just give a demo database. All right. I need to configure a username and the password to log into the database. I'll give a username here and I'll give a password which can try to configure. Okay. I gave a password setup like a username and the password setup for here. So here you can see, I see only one is available like a T4G.micro, T3.micro and T2.micro. So as I'm trying to select the under the free tier, right? So I'm selecting the T2.micro only. Okay. And we have a different storages up to 20 GB. I'm selecting only 10 GB for a practice purpose, or you can try to select 5 GB. Let's see. The minimum value is 20 GB. It is definitely required. So I'll select 20 GB only. If I select the 10 GB, it won't accept. See, the minimum value is 20 GB storage for a database to be launched. So I'm trying to select 20 GB. And connecting. You want to directly connect to the server from here, or you don't want to connect directly from here, or else you can try to launch a server and you can connect later. So I'm selecting don't connect to an EC2 instance directly from here. I'm selecting the IP4 version, IPv4. If you select the dual stack, it will try to support IPv4 and IPv6. Okay, I'm selecting the IPv4. I'm launching this particular database in the VPC, the default VPC, which is already in place. Okay. And it is also giving an error. I mean, not an error, it's kind of a note. After a database is created, you can't change its VPC. It is giving some notation. Okay. And then I'm going with the default subnet group, which is already in place. If you have to create a new subnet, you can try to have the creation, but I'm going with the default VPC only. Public access, you want to have this access over the public internet so that I can try to connect this database anywhere. Okay, I'm giving a public access, yes. If you give public access, it will try to assign a public IP address to the database. That means if you launch a server, you can directly connect this server, database server from any Amazon EC2 server. That will be helpful. I'm clicking on yes. And you want to create a new security group, you can try to click on create new security group. I'll give a security group name as demo DB SG security group. Okay. Demo DB security group. I'm giving a sample. And under different availability zones, you can try to have this deployed. I'm clicking on no preference. I'm okay with any of the availability zone. This database can be deployed. As under the free tier, you can launch under one availability zone, right? So it will select only one. So I'll go with the password authentication because at the top I set the username and the password here. So I'll go with the database authentication options as password level. I don't need a monitoring. And this is kind of an estimation cost. If you are not using a free tier account, this is the estimation cost. But after crossing this kind of a free tier limitation, this is the estimation cost it is trying to show, monthly cost. So I've selected all the information by default. I'll click on create database. Let's wait for it to be created. So it's creation mode. Let's give it some time. Your database might take a few minutes to launch. So let's wait it to be created and coming into the green status. Someone had a question. Can we use MySQL application instead of doing it in AWS? Yes, you can use MySQL software outside of the AWS and you can connect that SQL directly to the cloud server in EC2 as well. You can deploy. SQL is a third party as well. It is available. You can use it. It is backing up. Let's wait for some time. In the meanwhile, while it is getting launched, any doubts? You can ask in the Zoom chats. As I told you, we have a free tier account. The limitation for using Amazon relational database, we have a 750 hours on t2.micro. Apart from that, if once you cross the 750 hours, it will be chargeable. So now it is available. See, my database is ready. It has been launched under the availability zone, one availability zone, that is US West 2B. The size of this database utilizes t2.micro, correct? I like 1 core CPU and the 1 GB RAM. So this is the CPU. And once I click on this, we have all the details like endpoint, availability zone, VPC, and you can see all the details, right? What I'll try to do, I'll launch a server. Like for example, I want to launch a real-time application server and utilize and connect this database from the server so that I can try to have a communication between server to the database. So my data can be stored from the application server to the database. Okay. I'll launch a sample server and connect to the database and we'll try to perform some sample queries, for example. Okay. I'll go to EC2. I'll launch some Ubuntu operating system Linux server. Okay. So I'll just try to demo server. I'll select Ubuntu. I'll search. I'll select the first one, Ubuntu free tier. Okay. And T2.micro free tier. And while launching a server, it has to be always launched under the same VPC where this database has been launched. I launched this database under default VPC 8C5, right? This is the ID. So to connect the server to database, I need to launch under same network. So it should be under 8C5 only. Otherwise, the database connection to the server, it won't happen. Okay. I am trying to select existing security group like a Linux. Let me see if which security group this has been created. The security group, you can see this has been created demo security group, right? I'll try to search the security group ID. It should be, I'm selecting the security group so that it will have the ports that has been configured. If I need to see the ports which has been configured, I'll see what kind of a ports enabled for database. The ports also has to be enabled. Without the port open, the database connection cannot be happened. For us as security group, port for the database to be launched, it had some ports should be enabled. You can see MySQL port should be enabled. That is 3306. Whenever you are working, trying to launch a server database and connect the server, this port has to be enabled. Otherwise, the connection won't work. The port type is MySQL protocol and the port number is 3306. Okay, I'm selecting this. So I've selected the server in the same port as well. Now what I'll try to do, I'll add one more rule for a Linux because it has to be launched under Linux, right? Like I'm connecting the Linux server, I also enable SSH port as well. Save rules. This is also done. Launch instance. Let's see. It's running. Let me try to connect the server. So my Ubuntu has been connected. Okay. So type clear. I just let me enter the first command sudo su. It's kind of a administrative login. I'm trying to log in. Sudo su is a root user. I'm trying to log in super user. So that means with the help of a root user account access, I can try to perform some administrative actions. I can log in successfully. So let me try to install some kind of an SQL compatible client updates into the server so that I can connect the server database server from this server. Okay, from the EC2 server. Sudo apt update. So I'm trying to install some specific command so that it will try to install some kind of a required softwares to connect the SQL server. Okay. It is trying to download from the backend repository from over the internet. Sudo apt-get install MySQL software. So I'll type MySQL -server space -y. It is trying to install MySQL software into the AWS server, EC2 server. Okay. Now, as I install the software, I'll try to start the SQL service. Sudo. I'm trying to enter the Linux commands. Okay. I'll show you the commands, what has been done. Sudo service MySQL start. It will try to start the SQL service. If I want to see the whatever the commands I type in the past, I can type history. It will show you the commands which I try to enter. You can take a snippet of this if whoever is having a doubt, like a sequential commands which I try to enter. First, I try to log in with a sudo su, and then I enter sudo apt update, and then sudo apt get install MySQL server space -y, sudo service MySQL start. History is something command which will try to show whatever the commands I try to install. If someone want a snippet, they can try to take a snippet of these commands, like a picture. So these are the Linux commands. Okay. Is it clear? Science Sarkar, you just took the snippet, right? Okay. You can, anyone if you want to do, they can try to practice later by typing these commands. And I am just done with the installation of the software into the EC2 server. Now I have a compatible SQL software into the EC2 server. Now I can connect from this server to the database where I try to launch the AWS cloud, right? So I could actually connect the database server from this EC2. So I want to clear all the above information, just trying to clear the page. I'll type clear command. It will go onto the top. Okay. Okay, it just completely gone down. I'll try to zoom out, zoom in maybe. Okay. So I'll just trying to connect. Now I'll connect the database which has been launched. So to connect the database, this is the endpoint. Okay. If you go click on the databases, DemoDB, under the connected and security, this is an endpoint and the port number. So with this endpoint, this is a host name, this is a port. When you try to enter these details in the server, then only you'll be able to connect. I'll open the notepad. In notepad and copy this. Copy. And the port number is 3306. Right? I'll enter this. This is the endpoint. This is the port 3306. So I'll try to write a command to connect the server. So the command should be MySQL space minus h space endpoint name. Okay, endpoint name here, and then minus capital P, the port number which you are connecting. The port number is 3306 space username minus U is a username. Username what I have given some kind of an password. I mean admin, right? I just gave as an admin as a username. Minus U and the admin, and I need to type minus P. And when it asks for the password, I need to type the password. Whatever the password, I try to configure the database. So I have to modify this command. So what I'll try to do, MySQL space minus h. So I'll copy this endpoint here. I'll paste at the endpoint name, and then minus P 3306 minus U admin is a username, password. I'll just try to enter later. Okay, I'll copy this command, go to the server, I'll paste it. Let's see if it is connecting or not. Okay, so it is asking for the password. So whatever the password I entered, I just type in. I just entered. Let's see. Mostly if a database is not connecting from the server, mostly issues should be from the networking level, like a security group configuration and the VPC level configuration. So let's see what is the response it is giving. It's taking time for it to connect. Let's see what kind of a security groups we have enabled. It is demo SC. It shouldn't take this much of a time. It should quickly connect that. Inbound rules, MySQL and SSH. The source IP, it has been given something. I'll try to modify the inbound rules again. Rather some specific network, I'll give everything allowed to all 0.0.0. Let me save rules. I'll give in 0.0.0 for this SQL to be open. Okay, the port. Okay, let me try to re-enter. See, it's cannot connect to the MySQL server. I just enabled 0.0 port, right? I'll click on up arrow. I'll execute the command again. Admin 1 2 3. Password problem. I'll type a correct password. See, now it is got connected. Welcome to the MySQL monitor. Your MySQL connection ID is 24. It has been successfully connected. You can see the MySQL tab here. That means this Windows server has successfully connected to the relational database. Okay. Why it was connected? Because earlier this port was restricted to some specific IP address. So when I'm trying to type 0.0.0, I can connect this server to the, because it got access to the EC2 server to connect, right? That's what it is connecting. You can see it came up as MySQL. It's properly coming up. I'll type clear. Okay. So I connected to the database. Let me try to create a database, for example. Okay. So to create a database, we can try to fetch some commands from online as well. What is a create database table? Create database and the database name. Okay, let's see how it works. For example, I'll type create database, and you can try to give any database table name like XLR database. Okay, I'm entering. So a row got affected, like means I try to enter some SQL query. Now I'll type use database XLR DB colon. Should be, we type use XLR DB. See, when I'm trying to type use XLR DB, the database has been changed to XLR DB. So I'm into the XLR DB now. So in this database table, I mean, in this particular database syntax, I'm trying to create a tables, for example. To create a tables, for example, we have a different commands. For example, SQL create table. What is the command? Create table, table name, and the columns and the data types, columns and the data types. For example, I'll try to create some a person table. Okay. Then what I'll try to do, I'll just try to enter some command. Create table persons table. Okay. I'll try to open the brackets. Person ID. I'm trying to have a person ID. That means ID means it is in the integer value. I'm trying to type string as integer. And the last name. Last name. I'll just try to type everything in the small letters. Person ID, integer value. Name should be the characters value, right? I'm trying to type varchar. Okay. Maybe I'm giving a maximum characters as 255. Comma. First name. This is also characters. So I'm giving a limitations of 255 again. Comma. Person ID, last name, first name, and address, for example. Address also characters. Varchar 255. Maximum of limit, characters limitation I'm giving. And for example, pin code. Pin code means integer values, right? I'm trying to type integer values. Okay. I just try to type this and I'll just close the table, for example. And I'm trying to end it with a semicolon. Okay. Okay. Here it is trying to have this and closing with the brackets close and the semicolon. That's what I'm trying to put here. Let me enter. See, query executed, 0 rows affected. Now a table has been created. So to see the information about this particular table, whatever the data is there, we can try to use the select query. Okay. We can use the select query. So let me try select. We have a select query here. You can see which will try to give us the information. Select query is used to select the data from database. Select from the table. Okay, let me try to do it. Select star means anything, whatever is there from XLR, XLR DB. Persons table, right? I created a table as persons. You can see when I'm trying to click select star, show me the data which is there inside the persons table. What is the data? it is completely empty because I don't have any data. I just define this attributes. Now, if I want to insert some data into this, I need to use query. So if I need to insert query, I'll try to have SQL insert into. You can see insert into table name, the columns, whatever, like a person ID, first name, last name, and address and everything, right? And the values I need to define here, for example. So I'll try to use this kind of a information to input some data here. Insert into which tables? Persons. Person ID, comma, last name, comma, first name, comma, address, comma, what else I have? Pin code. These are the attributes which I have defined, right? Now I'll define what values I have to put. Like which values I want to put into this particular data. Under the person ID, I'll try to give some data 143, 1345, comma. The last name should be some kind of a data. Like I'll open a bracket, John, and comma. The first last name and the first name should be, for example, Vic. This is a first name, comma. Next one is address. Here address, I'll just try to give some kind of a data as Canada. And then comma, pin code. Pin code I have to give a number. So 14362, something like that. Okay. The integer value doesn't need a quotation. So I'm just closing this with a bracket and I'm with a semicolon, I'm entering. So query executed, one row affected. I'll execute select star from persons again to see if our data is executed or not. Select star from persons. See, a SQL table has been created inside the database. You're seeing my screen, right, everyone? I have successfully created a table and trying to insert some particular data. You're getting my point? If I want to create additional line inside this particular table, I'll try to modify some names here. I'm trying to have some more data. India and pin code. I'm entering again. So one more query executed. If I try to click on up arrow with a select star, see, new line has been added. So again, my data has been inserted. In this way, I can try to have multiple data inserted here. India. I'm entering again. One row affected. I'll select star again. See, new lines has been integrated. So this is, we have tried to understand select query, create a database query, insert query. If I want to update some kind of a data in some kind of particular row or the column, I can use the update command. If you can see SQL update, the update select statement is used to modify the existing records in a table. So what I'll try to do, I'll just update with some kind of an update query. Update which table? Persons table space set address of Rohit Mishra, for example, set address equal to, instead of India, I'll just try to update with a some other location. For example, set address equal to Canada. Contact name Okay, set address equal to this, where person ID equal to 1346134545. 134545. So this particular ID, I want to set the address equal to Canada. Okay. So I'll just put this thing. Query executed, one row affected. Let's see if this India will be changing to Canada here. I'll open the select star query again. See, this has been changed to the Canada actually. You're seeing my screen, right? Earlier this is in India. I just try to change it to the Canada. This is kind of a modify. Okay. And this is update query. So if I want to delete this table, I can simply try to type delete from what was the database table? Persons. So this table has been deleted. If I try to enter select star, there won't be a no table. Okay. So this has been deleted. I'll tell you to delete the database as well. Delete database XLR DB. Delete from XLR DB. Table has been deleted. I'm trying to delete the complete database as well. So let me use the drop command. Drop XLR DB. It should be the drop command actually. Drop database and the database name. So drop database and the database name. Now see, my database has been successfully deleted. In this way, I can use SQL queries to practice trying to integrate. Okay. So I've deleted the table, and I also deleted the database completely as well. Okay. As I'm done with this, I'll go and try to terminate the server quick. And I also try to delete the database from here. I'll go to the actions. I'll try to delete. I don't need a snapshot. I don't need a backup. I'm trying to type the delete here. Delete me. I acknowledge. Go and delete. Okay. I hope you got an understanding, right? Let it get deleted as well. The database, it is getting deleted. Was it clear with the concept on trying to understand and execute the database services? It will take some time. Any doubts still here? So, okay. So let's try to understand another database that is nothing but a non-relational database. Okay, we have tried to practice one relational database. We'll try to see how non-relational database works. Non-relational database is something where the data which will be stored in unstructured format. Okay, where we can try to have unstructured data which doesn't require an organized manner to be data to be stored. It's a fully managed non-relational database, which will be stored in values in the form of a key values and documented database service. It can performance at any scale, extremely horizontal scaling capability. That means if you want to store the data in a huge storage level, this kind of a DynamoDB, the non-relational database will be a useful feature. Okay. So let me show it. So it is a serverless because we don't need to manage any serverless in the background. It is giving us a software in the front end in the AWS we can try to launch, which will providing encryption access, control backups as well, same like RDS. When you can see the features, it works well for the application that require a high volume data, like within high level of a volume to be stored inside the database. Such kind of a non-relational database will be useful. DynamoDB is one kind of a non-relational database within the cloud, which scale very quickly, which doesn't require any complex queries. Like, we try to execute SQL queries, right? We don't require in DynamoDB such kind of a non-relational databases. It requires high throughput and low latency. That means you have a frequent reads and writes. You want to store the data and you want to execute it, where you want to have the data to be come up very frequently. Such kind of a requirements we have. The features for this DynamoDB is nothing but we don't have any complex SQL tables, and items can have a different attributes. As I told you, this kind of an SQL database, we have a attributes, right? Select, star, and integer value, character values, and trying to insert some fixed attributes and the constraints, correct? So these are kind of a fixed attributes. But here we don't require any kind of attributes that has to be defined. Like in the column, you can try to put integer values. In the in rows, you can try to put a columns. You can try to put a different values. It doesn't give you any errors. That's a benefit compared to the RDS systems here. It doesn't have any fixed attributes. You can try to put any different attributes in particular row or the column. We have an in-memory cache system. It supports peak for more than 20 million requests per second. That's a benefit for DynamoDB. So when these kind of a projects it will be used, for example, you have a games where you are trying to have a live scoreboards, live chats in the games applications, where you have a cricket commentary and the live chats. Okay. Where you want to see the player leadership boards and the scoreboards and the live chats, streamings, and the virtual chats application in some kind of a, applications. Okay. Some kind of an, social media websites, right? So what happened during that level of applications, you doesn't require to store the data in a structured format, but still you have to load the data. For example, games, we try to, have the data in a chats, right? Like a scoreboards, profile information, everything that has to be stored in some particular database, because whenever the user is opening the same application in the mobile, it will try to give you this data. It can be in any form. So such kind of applications or a random data, applications or the type of a data which doesn't require organized data to be stored. So such kind of a things, the DynamoDB will be a very helpful database. Okay. It has the same features, like we can try to configure IAM policies and VPC endpoints, encryption formats, everything will be same. Okay. So when I'm trying to open this, for example, DynamoDB, it's a managed NoSQL database. In which use cases it will be used, we'll try to see here. A fast and flexible NoSQL service and database at any scale. Okay. Where these databases will be used usually, advertisement technology, like a key value storing the various kinds of a marketing data, such as a user profile information, user events, clicks, and the visited links information. And in the gaming applications, in all the capabilities of a gaming platforms, including game state, player data, session history, and the leaderboards. And the retail companies, they use it for the storing information like a shopping cart information, engines, and the inventory tracking, fulfillment, custom profiles, and accounts. Media and entertainments, where like a video streaming information, like a critical real-time data. Okay. And the banking and finance, where it will be used to have the information to store like a user transaction and transaction processing, fraud detection, So such kind of a quick data that has to be stored, which doesn't require to be in a structured. It can be unstructured and can be of any attributes like a string values, character values, anything it can be. During such kind of a project loads, this DynamoDB NoSQL database will be a useful feature. Okay. So for example, I'm trying to create a table here. So here I'm trying to define a table called, for example, population table. Okay. Population table. I'm trying to create a population table manually. It doesn't require any server to be stored and trying to have it's a completely serverless. It is trying to provide as a application software as a service to the users. All right. And directly I can try to create a table here. I can try to define the keys. Like we have a different key here, the partition key and the sort key. The partition key is nothing but a part of the table's primary key. It will be used to fetch and trying to identify the information from that particular table. It is kind of a primary key we can try to define. For example, whatever the value I'm trying to define here, it will be fixed. Like I can try to use country as a key value as a string. If you want to put some other integer value, you can try to put as number. Okay. And the sort key is kind of a secondary key of the table's primary key. It is an optional. If you want to use it, you can try to use it. I'm ignoring this. Let me try to create a table with a population table. The partition key as a country here. And you can see DynamoDB standard. It has been going with the default settings. The capacity is 5 read capacity units, 5 write capacity units. Okay. Like at a time, this is the capacity. It can try to see the information at a time like a 5 reads and the 5 writes at happen at the same time. Okay. I'm trying to go with the default settings and trying to create a sample table and try to show you how it looks like in the GUI level. The table is being created. It's pretty simple and it's not complex as SQL, where we need to fetch the information with SQL queries, trying to have that with an attributes and trying to perform the query based search, right? Let's see how it's going to be here. It is being created. Now my database is active. See, simply I just try to create a table here. I'll open this. So this is how the console GUI it looks like. And I have a table. Let me try to see the explore table items. Okay. So I don't have any items, right, in this population table. Let me try to create a manual data that has to be inserted here. For example, I'm trying to create an item here. You can see inside this table, I'm trying to insert some data. I'll try to create a table. You can see the partition key is fixed. It can't be changed. So under the country, I'm trying to define as India, for example. Okay. It is a string value, right? It is fixed. It is a India I'm trying to enter. I'm trying to create an item. You can see country string has been entered. I'll try to edit item and I'll try to add some more data inside this table. For example, I'm trying to add a new attribute. Earlier in the relational database, I tried to add the information with the queries, right? I'm trying to add it from the GUI level. For example, I'm to add it as a population, for example. Population, for example, some kind of a millions IP, for example, 80 million or something. I'm trying to have it as this thing. It is a number. So the population, I'm trying to add it. I'm trying to add a new string value. Uh, state. Madhya Pradesh, something like that. It's a string value. I'm trying to add some more values. Latitude 70. See, I'm trying to give a random information. I'm trying to save. Okay. If you see, this has been added with some kind of information into this particular row. I'll try to create a one more item. So as I told you, the country partition key is fixed. I already loaded with India, right? If I try to create a new item in the same table, for example, India only, let's see if it is accepting or not. It won't accept. As I told you, the partition key is fixed. You can see the conditional request failed. An item with a primary key you provide already exists, so it cannot be created. So we'll try to create a new one. Pakistan. I'll add some more value. Like, see, I'm trying to add some other information. Capital. Just trying to have some random data thing. String value. Earlier I've given a population, right? I'll just try to type only the small and caps letters. Even the case sensitive also it will accept. POP. It's kind of a 30 million, for example. I'm adding longitude. See, I'm trying to add a different attributes. Like this is a different name, POP is a different name, longitude is a different name. But in general, RDS relational database, in a single table, these all has to be same. Otherwise, it will give an error. But here in the DynamoDB, it doesn't matter. Whatever the data you give, it will quickly accept. String. I just given a small state, right? I'll just try to give a state. See different values here. I'm clicking on create item. See, irrespective of this, attributes, it doesn't give me any error. Any unstructured data, the data can be in any form, whatever the things you can see, it is trying to have a different data over there. The attributes can be different. That's what it is trying to have. If you see the characteristics, items can have a different attributes. It don't have a no SQL table and no restrictions, no schema restrictions. That's the main difference. I can try to different items again. China. View. I just given state, right? See, one item and one information in some particular row or column, it is completely different and it is not related, it is not giving. So it's kind of an unstructured data, any data that can be trying to store inside this particular DynamoDB table. You're understanding what are we doing here? Anyone? You're getting my point? How this can be fetched? So this is how the DynamoDB, this kind of an service or database which will be used for the applications which doesn't require a structured data. Unstructured data can be stored. We don't require a complex queries, no schema restrictions, which doesn't require an organized data to be formed. So such kind of a requirements, these kind of a databases, NoSQL databases will be useful, like a games, random dynamic applications, chats, leaderboards, scoreboards, and application which requires a frequent read and writes, and which doesn't have any issues with the storage level, like a low level to very high level data, where it doesn't create any load on the database, such kind of a things. So based on the project loads and the real-time application specific, these databases will be useful. Okay. So you can try to download this database, data, with the help of this download option into the results to see the information in a structured format. And also you can try to export this data to an S3 bucket, or else you can try to import the data from S3 bucket to this particular DynamoDB as well. There are different options. Okay. So this is how it can be helpful. This is all about DynamoDB. And I just try to create a manual table right here with my, in general on the UI level. Usually this DynamoDB table will be connected to the applications in real-time applications. Whenever the applications are operated by the different clients or the users, the data will be automatically creating a tables and the data inside this particular cloud. So the backend, storage and the configuration, the availability, durability, installation, everything will be managed by the AWS cloud. That is how it is going to be help out. All right. I'm just trying to delete. Yes, I don't need a backup. This is what about the database overview and understanding on database actually. I don't have any database backups as well. Yes. Any doubts on understanding the databases, NoSQL and relational database systems? So we have a services called migrating data into AWS database. For example, you have a database in the on-premise environment and they don't want to spend much time and manpower and trying to save the cost. They want to move the complete database from the on-premise to the cloud environment. We have a migration services. We can use to migrate to and from most commercial and open source databases. Migrate between the databases on Amazon EC2, relational database, S3 and on-premises. Okay. You can migrate complete database from cloud servers and also from the on-premise environment. We have a migration services provided with the cloud. So this is how the process, like we try to perform the migration. We have a tools where we try to create a target database, migrate the database schema. We try to use the replication process, initiate the data transfer and trying to switch the production. So it is very quick, such kind of a technology where AWS is trying to provide. So these are the various features, how we can try to effectively use the database services in the cloud. And we can try to use it based on our requirements in the project loads. Okay. So that's all for today. Any doubts? You can try to ask in the Zoom chat. Are we able to understand what has been done? Is it the concepts are clear? Fully managed service means AWS is trying to completely take over the control on the backend infrastructure. That's why we are calling as a fully managed service. Integration of a data, that means you can try to integrate the data of application of a real-time application, for example, that we can try to connect to the DynamoDB so that it will be automatically replicate the data into the DynamoDB. We cannot add the servers to the DynamoDB. As I told you, DynamoDB is a serverless software. We can connect the server to the DynamoDB. That means the server inside the data, whatever the application servers or the web servers where customers are using, that data will be integrated to the DynamoDB. DynamoDB is kind of a software. It's not a server, okay, which is provided by AWS. So that's why it is trying to tell, serverless database. You can see here, serverless computing. Serverless means it doesn't require a server. It is providing a software only. Any doubts? In real time, we will connect the DynamoDB endpoint to an application which will be done in a project. So that which cannot be done, within this short frame of a time. Okay. Based on the limited time frame, we could actually review the understanding and overview. So someone had a questions like images or videos can be stored into database? No. So we need to understand in mind that database doesn't require the different file formats. So first, the data like images or the videos, it has to be converted into a different formats like blobs or by base 64 or the binary extension files. So this will, we need to manually convert the files into blobs or manage themselves in whatever the format, like a base 64 and the binary. There are some softwares. So binary large object, blob means, okay, it is a MySQL data type that can try to store data as images, video files, and the multimedia and the PDF files. That has to be converted, and that data will be stored inside the database. Okay. So such kind of a videos and the documentations and the images, SQL database are the ideal, like a structured and well-defined data. So which is a good choice for storing video metadata, which has a clear schema. Everyone are clear? Even you try to practice, please don't try to make sure it shouldn't have any backups or shouldn't have a snapshots. You should always delete the database backups and the snapshots. Okay. Don't forget to delete the lab sessions once you're done. All right, if there are no doubts, thanks everyone. We shall catch up tomorrow then.
Yeah, okay. Thank you, Balaji. Sorry. Thank you, Bala. Guys, hope you enjoy the session. So, is there any queries regarding notes, YouTube links, or LMS? Can you please drop message in the chat box? And I'm sending the attendance link in the chat box. Please make sure you are attendant. Bisweshwar Sahu is asking when is our exam? Maybe it was a surprise, right? So surprise can't be revealed. From YouTube, Rajbir Chandra is asking how many days left for this course? 5 days more. This is the 10th day, so 5 days remain. Okay, guys, then there is no more questions, it seems, right? We will wind up the session for today. Visveshwar Sahu is asking last two classes would present in YouTube. Yeah, these classes are in YouTube as well. You can check from there also. Okay. Okay, then there is no more questions. Yes, we'll wind up the session for today. Thanks for joining. We'll meet on tomorrow. Okay.